Imagine standing in a cramped elevator in the Warwick Hotel in Manhattan. The year is 1991, and you are the acting boss of the Lucchese crime family. You have a loaded .38 caliber revolver tucked into your waistband, but for the first time in your life, the weight of the steel offers no comfort. You are Alfonso Little Al Darko, a man who has lived and breathed the toad of Omertà since you were a boy in Brooklyn. Yet you are certain that the men waiting for you behind room 1906 are not there to discuss business, they are there to kill you. This is the moment the golden age of the American Mafia truly began to rot from the inside out. Alfonso Darko wasn't just another mobster who flipped. He was the first sitting boss to ever break the blood oath, and his story is a chilling descent into a world where loyalty was a lie and survival meant destroying everything you once claimed to love. Alfonso Darko was not a product of modern greed. He was a throwback to a different era. Growing up in the tight-knit, shadowy corridors of Little Italy, he viewed the Lucchese crime family not as a criminal enterprise, but as a sacred brotherhood. To Darko, being a made man was the highest secular honor a man could achieve. He spent decades as a loyal soldier, a man who followed orders without question and who believed in the structural integrity of the mafia. He was an earner and a shooter, a rare combination that allowed him to rise through the ranks under the leadership of Anthony "Tony Ducks" Corallo. However, the internal landscape of the Lucchese family shifted drastically in the late 1980s. When the leadership passed to Vittorio Vic Amuso and Anthony "Gaspipe" Casso, the family transformed from a business-oriented syndicate into a paranoid death cult. Darko found himself operating under two of the most bloodthirsty bosses in the history of organized crime. Amuso and Casso didn't just kill their enemies, they killed their friends, their subordinates, and even people who were merely suspected of thinking about cooperating with the law. This atmosphere of absolute terror is what eventually pushed Darko to the edge of the precipice. During Darko's rise to acting boss, the Lucchese family was embroiled in the infamous Windows case, a massive price-fixing conspiracy involving the replacement of windows in New York City public housing. While the scheme was incredibly lucrative, it also brought intense heat from the FBI. Amuso and Casso, fearing indictment, went into hiding, leaving Darko to manage the daily operations of the family in New York. Being the acting boss under Amuso and Casso was like holding a ticking time bomb. From their secret locations, the two bosses began issuing hit lists via coded messages. They demanded the execution of anyone they perceived as a threat or a weak link. Darko was the man expected to coordinate these murders. He watched as his associates were picked off one by one, often for reasons that defied logic. The internal logic of the Lucchese family had collapsed. It was no longer about protecting the thing of ours, Cosa Nostra. It was about the survival of two men who were willing to burn the entire house down to stay out of a prison cell. The turning point for Darko occurred on September 21, 1991. He was summoned to a meeting at the Warwick Hotel with several high-ranking members of the family. By this point, Darko's intuition, honed over decades in the underworld, was screaming at him. He noticed small, unsettling details, the way his associates looked away when he spoke, the unusual security arrangements, and the fact that the meeting was held in a room where the bathroom door had been removed to prevent anyone from hiding. Darko believed he was being set up for a hit. He spent the entire meeting with his hand near his weapon, calculating his escape route. He realized that the men he had spent his life protecting were now his primary predators. When he managed to leave the hotel alive that night, he didn't go back to his family or his crew. He realized that the mafia he believed in, The one based on honor and mutual protection did not exist. It was a meat grinder, and he was next in line. In a move that sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld, Alfonso Darko walked into a federal building and offered to surrender. He wasn't just a low-level informant, he was the acting boss. He possessed the blueprints to the Lucchese family and the keys to the inner workings of the 5 families of New York. His cooperation was devastatingly effective. Unlike many informants who tried to hide their own crimes, Darko was brutally honest. He admitted to his involvement in murders, extortions, and conspiracies. His testimony was grounded in a meticulous memory for detail. He described the rituals, the secret meetings, and the cold-blooded orders issued by Amuso and Casso. Because he had been at the very top, his word carried a weight that the government had never before possessed. The impact of Darko's defection cannot be overstated. He became the star witness in a series of trials that dismantled the Lucchese leadership and crippled the other New York families. His testimony helped send Vic Amuso to prison for life without the possibility of parole. He pulled back the curtain on the Windows case, the infiltration of labor unions, and the systematic corruption of the construction industry. Darko's betrayal was seen by his former peers as the ultimate sin, but Darko viewed it as a logical reaction to a broken system. He famously argued that the bosses had betrayed the oath first by turning on their own men. He wasn't just testifying against individuals, he was testifying against the very concept of the American Mafia as it had existed for nearly a century. By the time he was finished, the Lucchese family was a shadow of its former self, and the FBI had enough intelligence to keep the mob on the defensive for decades. After his time on the witness stand, Darko disappeared into the witness protection program. For a man who had once commanded hundreds of soldiers and controlled millions of dollars in illicit revenue, his new life was one of mundane anonymity. He lived under an assumed name in an undisclosed location, always looking over his shoulder, knowing that there was a permanent contract on his life. Interestingly, Darko never expressed regret for his life in the mob, nor did he express traditional remorse for his crimes until much later in life. He viewed himself as a soldier who had been betrayed by his generals. He lived out his remaining years in a strange limbo, a man who had destroyed the only world he ever knew, because that world had become a killing machine that no longer respected its own rules. Alfonso Darko passed away in 2019 at the age of 86, not from a hitman's bullet, but from complications related to diabetes. He died in obscurity, a far cry from the neon lights of Manhattan and the social clubs of Brooklyn. His legacy remains that of a man who broke the ultimate taboo. Before Darko, the idea of a boss flipping was unthinkable. After him, it became a recurring nightmare for every mobster in America. He proved that the Mafia's greatest strength, its secrecy, was also its greatest weakness. Once a man at the top decides to talk, the entire structure crumbles like a house of cards. Alfonso Darko didn't just tell a story, he provided the final chapter for the Lucchese family's era of dominance and changed the face of American law enforcement forever.